Welcome to Truth in Lending, America's neatest, freshest, most invigorating mortgage and real estate news podcast. Grab your correction tape and get ready to Photoshop your way through the next half hour because today is all about loan fraud. No, not how to commit loan fraud, you silly pirates. How to identify loan fraud and what you can do about it. Today is August 16th, 2023, and this is Truth in Lending. Please give us a warm welcome for the Sultan of CE himself.
It's him. He's
Mr.
Here.
Ken Perry.
Woo!
The Sultan.
Oh, what a great intro.
The Sultan of CE. You know, we had you on the show back in January.
Yeah.
You called in. That was pretty fun.
It wasn't as fun as this, though. Being in studio is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I feel so
We'll keep that
official
going.
right now.
Yeah. Well, it's so official that we made you your very own intro music. Yeah. Because today,
It's all about loan fraud.
loan fraud.
Boom, boom, boom.
That's right.
All right. Well, let's get into it. So, what is loan fraud? Give us your
My
expert
definition. All right. Loan fraud is a knowing misrepresentation or concealment of a material fact in order to encourage the granting of a loan. I mean, just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Just off the top of his head.
Well.
Wow.
And you've seen quite a bit of it, I presume, in your
Tons.
years.
Yeah. I just told my kids a story of how I committed loan fraud. And that it was a great story. But my kids were going to McCall, Idaho. And I'm like, that's where I did my first fraudulent loan. So, yeah.
Wait.
Oh, they grow up
You
so
didn't know we were
fast.
going this way, did you?
I've heard that.
No, 1998, when I became a loan officer, my first ever loan was on a bed and breakfast. And another loan officer told me all we have to do is we have to hide the fact that it's a bed and breakfast so underwriters don't see it, get the appraiser to not mention it in the loan or in the appraisal, and then we could do it as an owner occupied like all, primary residents, and we did it, not knowing I was totally committing fraud. And so, when my daughter went up there, I'm like, oh, go drive by the bed and breakfast that I illegally refied.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, statute of
Memories,
limitations
just
is 5
memories.
years, so we're good. But yeah,
I'm learning so much already.
well, the IRS and the Postal Service, which investigates mail fraud, they have a video of me explaining how I committed fraud because they
No.
subpoenaed it. I had shot a video of me teaching mortgage fraud class, and it was kind of a scared straight, like, I get it. Like, I was new in the business. I was 23 years old. I didn't know anything about mortgages. I did what other loan officers said to do, and that's how I fell into it. So when they subpoenaed the video of that, when they were investigating this company that had committed mortgage fraud, they were going to put a bunch of guys in jail. And so they said, we want the video of what you taught them. And I'm like, oh, no. You
Where
sure?
is
And I
that
reviewed
video?
it, and literally the only part I filmed is me talking about committing mortgage fraud twice. And I sent them that video. I'm like, I don't know if you guys should even watch this because it's not really valuable for your investigation.
Did you sign an immunity deal?
I didn't. No, it was 5 years. It was actually over 5 years. The statute of limitations up, and it was attempted mortgage fraud. So even if they wanted me, which they didn't, they couldn't get me on actual mortgage fraud because the loan didn't close. And so is what he told me. So I was, but it was scary because I actually had him guest speak at my class, and he cuffed me in front of everybody. And I've never been handcuffed by a federal agent before. And so he did it.
Hold on,
and the whole
hold on.
time I'm like,
There's an asterisk there.
see how I said that? And the whole time I'm like, oh man, this is, I'm actually going to jail right now. I actually literally thought I was going to jail because I just sent him the video, and this is like 2 weeks later, he's a guest speaker, and he cuffed me in front of everybody.
Oh my
And he's like,
gosh.
how's this feel, Ken? And I'm like, really horrible, Abe. And he's like, yeah, so this is what we did he was explaining a story of he had arrested a guy on a basketball court in front of a basketball team he had coached.
Oh my gosh.
And he's like, see, being arrested in front of your peers is really a horrible thing. I'm like, can we get these cuffs off?
so is this a demonstration?
Yeah. Are we going downtown at that point? But yeah.
There is some
Dang.
history about this facility where we're recording. This actually used to be the bank vault of Community First Bank. And in 2009, the feds came in and shut it down. They did a raid on this building.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm okay. Good to be here.
I know. So
So you can feel it. The music
Yeah.
is just setting the vibe that's
Yeah.
already here.
So occupancy fraud was one of those things that, has always been kind of a big deal. Second homes used to be priced better than investment properties. And so that was kind of a thing. Have you seen occupancy fraud go up or down as a result of them making that change?
If you look at the definition of fraud, right, which is a knowing misrepresentation or concealing. So if we're just misrepresenting what they're actually doing with the property, I think that's gone up with Airbnb and some of the other, ways that you can rent your property out where it's not totally a primary residence, it's not totally a second home. There is rental in it, so short-term rental type stuff. I think just increases the possibility of people going, no, we're not doing that. It's been interesting because it is a public website, and so like Colorado, Denver, I think. Banned Airbnbs in certain areas of Denver. And so you can't put it on Airbnb and you can't technically rent it out, but then people still did. And it's like, I can see you. Like you're putting it on a website where I can see. Mm-hmm. And I think the more Google, the more search becomes easy, the more we can find stuff. And so, yeah, I do think it's up. I think that people still care about it. I just think in an environment like this where the rates are less than what's a good way to say rates suck?
Ideal.
Yeah.
Less than ideal.
As the rates get...
Look at the screen. It's red again today.
Red.
As the rates get worse and worse, I mean, people need to fund loans, right? Loan officers are down on their production. Realtors need to close deals. And I think it's not just occupancy fraud. I think it's all fraud is going up because of that desperation.
Well, that's fun.
Desperation. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to hear a story from you from pre-Great Recession days, the Wild West of loans.
Oh, there's too many. I'll tell you, I was in AE back then, and I would call in loan officers, and I would take these calls where somebody would go, hey, we want to do this. And I'm like, that's fraud. And they're like, so you're saying you won't do it? I'm like, yeah. Like, I had Long Beach and New Century on speed dial. I'm like, get over to them, see if they'll do something for you. And they, people just did crazy things, but what would happen is by the time they would call the next AE, they knew what to not say.
Right.
And so if you were getting the first call, you would hear, I'll never forget the call I got. The guy goes, hey, I've got to go stated on a deal. And I'm like, okay, why? He goes, what are you talking about? I go, why are you going stated? He's like, because he doesn't make enough money to qualify. I'm like, so he's W-2.
That was such a common theme back in the day for me.
Yeah. And I'm like, he's W-2 and doesn't make enough money, but you want to go stated? He's like, yeah. And I go, what's his debt ratio if you use his W-2s? And he's like, oh, it's like 80%, 70%. I'm like, so you're telling me this guy can't make this mortgage payment? Right. And you want to do the loan by lying about his income. So can you do that? No. Like it literally.
What do you want to?
You try to say something back to people in a way that makes them understand what they're asking to do. And you expect them to be like, oh my gosh, when you say it that way, I get it. But instead they're like, so I'll call another rep.
So I want this paycheck.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that obviously destroyed the market, right? That was the biggest. Had we not allowed for some of that stuff, then it would have saved that downfall.
Did I tell you how I went to the Forward event? Do you know Neil with the Forward event? He does like digital marketing, and it's really loan officers and real estate agents. And we're in Las Vegas, and we go off Las Vegas Strip to what's the bar called, Greg? That we were talking about in Vegas.
Greg's like, do not bring that
Such
up.
a good time, you can't remember it.
Like the antique shop style.
Rebar?
Rebar done in Las Vegas. So it's a little off the strip. Okay. But we go in there, and these locals are like kind of hitting on me and my friends. And he says, well, oh, you guys are from Oregon. I used to live in Oregon. I lived in Sheridan. And I was like... Oh, you did?
Oh,
and I was like, that's a blue collar or white collar crime. So that sounds like an interesting story. And he just looks at me like so wide eyed. And I was like, yeah, I know. And then we just kind of let that conversation die. And then we keep talking and we say, oh, we're here for like a mortgage conference with a bunch of mortgage lenders. And he goes, that's what got me into prison. And we were like, what? And he was a hard money lender. And so we're here with all of these, like, the owner of Housing Wire, like all these big people. And we go off the strip, and I met a complete fraudster.
Oh my gosh.
Welcome to Vegas.
It was so amazing. It was such a alternate world.
If you listen to, there's a podcast on Lehman Brothers. It's about the downfall of Lehman. And in that podcast, Lehman was trying to buy a subprime lender. And two guys at Lehman were like, we don't think this is a good idea. And so what they did is they flew to Orange County over by, like on Jamboree by the Spectrum over there where all the subprime lender buildings were. And they saw these dudes come over after work and they started drinking. And so these two guys just basically listened in on their conversations about what they were doing and how they were doing it. And they flew back and they're like, we cannot buy this company because they are horrendous in their behavior. And
Yeah.
it's just so funny what people would even say and brag about back then
Yeah.
at bars. And you don't really hear that a lot anymore. There's not a lot of bragging of guess what I did.
Yeah.
Bragging goes down with the market going down as well. So
Yeah. Well, he was 30 years into prison, 5 years out, and he was still like, I could do that loan. I could do this loan if we do. Going all the way down fraud. I was like, you're not there yet.
somebody didn't recover from their ways.
Yeah. So do you think the biggest offenders of fraud is borrowers, loan officers, processors, underwriters?
I don't think it's borrowers. I think borrowers, when they want a deal, they'll, play ball, but it's never really their idea. Usually not their idea. That's not most of the cases. And this, it's so funny how you asked that because can I get into something else? When I was brought in by the IRS to investigate a case, and I sat down and they would run these cases by me, these scenarios, right? I didn't know they were real cases. I just thought they were running scenarios to try and get better at their jobs and learn more. And so they're running all these scenarios and they're like, all right, in this case, who knew about it? And I'm like, oh, well, in that case, it's the builder, it's the loan officer would have known. And they're like, would the appraiser know? And I'm like, in that case, probably, yeah. And so we're running through these things, and all they wanted to do is figure out which ones would be liable and should they go after. And I didn't know that. But so I've been asked this question before in a federal building in downtown Vancouver. But the loan officer usually knows the most about the process, right? And so they're usually in the best position to commit fraud. It's pretty hard to sneak something by a loan officer. A loan officer might hear something from a realtor and just kind of look the other way, but there's not a lot the loan officer doesn't know in a transaction, right?
Yeah.
The realtor, some realtors are really good at hiding some of the things going on. Like, just tell me what you need and I'll get it.
We need to have them.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, well, realtor wasn't even on the list.
Well, you're
Let's
sitting
do it on
next.
the list.
No, you're sitting next to a realtor.
You give me great ideas, sir.
Yeah, he gave me 3 tips on committing fraud when I walked in.
Yeah. He's like, hey, when you talk to the loan officer, make
Yeah.
sure you don't mention that you're going to rent it out.
Yeah. Well, and they hide inspections and they hide.
Sure.
They sometimes will take off addendums to the agreement because those addendums are getting in our way. There's one case up in Washington where they got the loan officer for this, but the realtor loan officer went to the realtor and said, with that sewer inspection, coming back the way it did, it looks like we have to do some work. We can do the work. Let's just do that later. Could you please just change, the requirement of the inspection? And the realtor's, oh, absolutely. Will that close the deal? Sweet. And they made the change. The funny thing is they did it in email. And regulators know to read your emails now. So they're going in and reading emails and going, oh, look at this. And then they put the email in the case so we can read it, right? In a closed case, you can go back in and read the actual emails that went across.
Yeah.
So
is it realtors or loan officers?
It's loan
or
officers.
both?
Loan officers would be the most, and then realtors would probably be second in the deal. Appraisers are out of it now because they don't give a rip because they're not working for the business anymore.
Yeah.
They're not hoping you send them another appraisal. You have to because they're on a list, right?
That's right.
The way the law reads.
So what are some subtleties like going to borrowers? Because I've picked up on this, and there have been people that I've had to let go or say you're probably better off going somewhere else, or I'll do the loan if it's above board. But what are some subtleties that we can look for as loan officers that a borrower might be trying to pull the wool over our eyes?
Well, first off, are they shopping? If somebody has gone to 3 different lenders and now they're coming to you, you should ask yourself, why are they coming to me now, right? So sometimes, like I had one guy, loan officer, he was super excited and he goes, I just had this realtor call and it's a realtor and some other builder, and they want me to be the loan officer on like 20 deals. And I go, and I really do hate spoiling people's parties. Like, I don't want to be the guy that keeps like throwing in, oh yeah, but that's fraud or whatever. But I also don't want to be the guy that turns his head and doesn't support somebody in knowing the reality. And so I looked at the guy and I go, so they want you to do 20 deals for them. They're a builder and a realtor. They've been that for a while. Why you? And the guy had never thought of that. He was so happy to get the business that he didn't think, why are they asking me, a guy who's never done a loan for them before? They don't know anything about me and they just picked me. And usually the answer is other people wouldn't play ball and they're looking for somebody new that they can funnel all their stuff through. So look for that. They've never gone to you before and all of a sudden they're going to you, but they've also gone to 3 other people. Look for pauses in the conversation. So if you ask them about income, that should be a pretty straightforward answer.
Yeah.
Right? Or if you ask them if they're renting the house out, if they're like, and you can kind of see them thinking, do I tell them this? Like, they should tell you these things. But if they're pausing, it's a good time for you to go, why? What's up with the pause? What do I not know? That's my new favorite question is, what do I not know? I've been asking that. I'll ask that of my kids. I'll ask that at work. Like, tell me what I don't know, because there's something there. And that's usually a good open-ended question that will get something going. The problem is that question will sometimes kill your deal. And so there's a hesitation on loan officers going, if I don't ask, I don't know, which is called plausible deniability, and it rarely holds up in court.
I feel like I need to look for a new career. I've never been so afraid in a podcast. We've done 50 some odd of these.
We make that
clearly
joke.
I'm in the wrong line of work.
Yeah, every time we go to Ken Ferry's, we're like, apparently we all are terrible.
I always learn something from your in-person classes, because there will be times where, I've been doing this since 1999, and I was a processor for 15 plus years before I got into originations. And, I was in the downturn, I was in the liar's loans. I was, I had loan officers telling me to just push it through, just do the things.
Yeah.
And I always learn something new when it comes to loan fraud. Like, maybe I shouldn't do that anymore, or maybe I should look for something. So I'm sure the CFPB is taking notes. NMLS 1455628. You guys can call me on my cell phone. Take a look. Let me know what I'm doing wrong. Yeah.
So if we do get someone like a borrower or anything else, how do we report it? Where do we go with that?
So there's something called the Bank Secrecy Act, which says that you have to report all fraud. So as a loan officer, and loan officers for non-depositories didn't always have this requirement. It kicked in the last 10 years. And so you would have to report it to your anti-money laundering officer within your company. And people get confused about the word money laundering, because you think, oh, I have to look for terrorist activity and the laundering of money. But that act actually says that if you see something fraudulent, you have to say something. So to not report is actually a crime. And then to report and then tell your borrower you reported it is also a crime. And they actually arrested a guy who told his borrower, so I have to now report this as a crime.
Oh my gosh.
And the guy goes, how much would it take for you to not do that? And he agreed on a back alley deal to get a bunch of money from this guy to not report. He goes to grab the money in the alley that night, and the guy who comes was a federal agent and actually cuffed him.
Oh my gosh.
And so
joke's on you.
Yeah. So you do have the obligation to report that to whoever your anti-money laundering officer is. And if you don't know who that person is, then actually your company is in violation of the Bank Secrecy Act just by not telling you or training you on who to report that to. Yeah. And then there's a website that the FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, they have a website that you go on to and you fill out this big thing. It doesn't mean it's going to get investigated. Like Jack Bauer's not swinging through the window, right afterwards to bust you. It just lets them know. And what it does is create this centralized database for the feds so that they can go, wait a second, we have that somewhere else. And they can go, oh, you know what? In Florida, that same guy did the same thing, and now we're able to catch him over here. So they use that database to try and find anything on anybody who they're investigating.
Gotcha.
Wow. What usually happens if you're caught?
Nothing.
Oh.
Just kidding. Yeah, you're good. You're good.
What?
It depends if it's a
slap on the
state or
wrist.
federal. Yeah, if it's state or federal, it's going to depend, and then on the level of fraud. So we had a guy in Oregon who decided to loan his borrower the down payment for their house, and he did that through the borrower's mom. So he gave the borrower's mom money. The borrower's mom then gave the money to the daughter. Daughter buys the house. The loan officer writes the check to the borrower, or the borrower's mom writes the check back to the loan officer. And so that guy was it wasn't a criminal matter for him. It was a matter with the state Department of Finance, and they looked at it and said that they were going to take his license. I think they took it for 2 years, and then they let him back in. So, and he had to take a bunch of ethics classes, which should change everything for him.
Yeah, just like that guy that was in prison.
Yeah. You can teach that.
He stopped thinking about it.
So you don't always go to prison, and I think that sometimes you should.
Yeah.
Because I found out and I'm not going to name names, but I'd worked for a guy for a few months, and someone said, "Hey, do you know what this guy did?" And I said, "No clue." And there was, this was back in the day when people would, well, I'll just do the deposit. The client doesn't have enough money, so I'll just take some of my money, deposit it in their account, let it season for a couple of months. And apparently he had been doing this over and over and over again. We can talk after the show about
I'd love
who
that.
it is.
Yeah, I do want to hear this story.
And so he lost his license for 2 years, but was still able to stay employed in the mortgage industry and, quite honestly, oversee more loan officers before he got his license back to re-originate. And quite honestly, you know, back in the day, loan officers were right there with lawyers, used car salesmen. We had such a terrible, tarnished, in the public eye opinion. And to me, you know, integrity matters. You know, all these things matter, right? Service, price, integrity, all of these things. But I still get the people that I'll talk with. Maybe they did a loan back in the day and they just feel like I'm a used car salesman. And I just try to deflate as much as I can when having that conversation, because there are a lot of bad actors out there still.
Yeah.
Still.
Well, you have to think of this too. So I hate that it's this way, but I've talked to investigators who've dealt with this problem. The prosecutor has to want it. So if we're going to go on a conviction basis, so we're looking at just somebody going to jail, the state attorney has to go, yeah, this is big enough that I want to go after it. They need to be elected at some time, you know, down the road. And when they run for election as some sort of elected official in the court system, they want to be able to say, look at my track record of prosecuting these things. And so, like right now, opioid, you know, issues are obviously they're popular. They're going to get some press, and so they're going after stuff like, you know, like some abuses of you know, delivering opioids to people or whatever. So when we were popular back in 2008, we became the thing where somebody getting elected would want to say they're tough on crime when it comes to mortgage fraud, because look what just happened to the economy. And so we saw a lot of cases back then because that was sexy, and we're just not sexy anymore. So we're not getting the eyes. And really it is. I've talked to people who found like a red-handed, like easy case to prosecute, and they wouldn't pick it up because they're like, nah, is that really kind of what we're focusing on right now? And we've seen that with the states too. States come in, they do an audit. All they want to know is if you're sending out your disclosures on time. Wow. You could be committing massive amounts of fraud, but they're not looking for that today. They're looking for, you know, did you get the disclosures out? And it doesn't matter that borrower doesn't exist and the house doesn't exist. And they just want to know, did you get the disclosures out on that deal? Wow. Which, by the way, there was one of my favorite cases to read was the Georgia case where they got a set crew to build the facade of a house, and they did a cash out refi on a house that had burned down a long time ago.
Stop.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And they had the appraiser take pictures just with the angles so it looked like the house was real.
This was recently?
No, this is like 15 years ago.
Okay.
It was awesome though.
That's fine.
Wow.
That's what you said.
Yeah.
So the most outrageous case you have then?
Oh, it's so hard to pick the outrageous cases.
I feel like you've shared a lot, but I'm sure you have.
This guy called me one time because I talked about him in class, and he's like, "Can you at least stop using my name?" And I'm like, "Sure." But there was a dude. That had allegedly, these are all allegations, though he was arrested for it on the basketball court, and he was a loan officer. He went to a club, and he met the love of his life, and she came off the stage and the pole, and he told her he would take...
This is a family show, Ken.
He told her he would take care of her for the rest of her life, and he wanted to buy her houses and buy her all this stuff. And she was like, this guy's amazing. He's going to buy me houses. Well, he used her social security to buy houses. She didn't know she was borrowing the money. He said he would. Then he got cash out on the deal, so he got a kickback from the builder for doing it, because him and the builder were in cahoots on this. So they used her as a straw buyer to buy 2 houses.
Wow.
And then she was put into foreclosure on houses she didn't know she had. And he was, you know, on the run at that point. And so he was gone. But he was able to make I can't remember, it was $200,000 in kickbacks from the builder on that deal.
Wow.
And then the freaking craziest thing is he was in my class. So I ended up working the case with the investigator, where I was the expert on the case. And I look at it, and literally the day the application is signed is the day he was sitting in my class for 8 hours where I talked about mortgage fraud. And he signed her name to the 1003
My goodness.
in the class.
Oh Oh my gosh.
How amazing is it that he actually was committing mortgage fraud
like,
while
"Yep,
listening to me talk
got
about
it.
mortgage?
Hang on,
Yeah,
doctor
yeah. What
said."
else do I do? Totally.
Back to our intro. This is not how we do mortgage
Listen,
fraud
Ken,
podcast.
you can have access to my email now before we leave.
Oh man, use
Wow,
these
that's-
powers for good, not evil.
Yeah. So,
That's wild.
so originators are down. I spoke with someone at Arch Mortgage Insurance, a local rep. You probably know who she is.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation Monday, and she said that non-bank LOs in the height of 2021, there were 170,000 roughly. I don't have the exact number.
Yeah.
And now there are roughly 90,000 who would renewed for 2023. And we'll probably see that number go down even more for renewals in 2024. So with the reduction in originators and lenders this big, you still think that we're going to see an increase in mortgage fraud?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, it's funny that number is such an interesting number to me because I don't know where they get that number. I've been trying to get the number forever, and some numbers got thrown around and became fact, right? Like the telephone game where it's like, well, I heard it's this. And then somebody's like stating facts about how many loan officers we lost. The numbers we get come directly from the NMLS. They would normally have released them by now. They haven't released them yet.
Right.
So I don't know where that number comes from, but it seems accurate. Like I wouldn't doubt if there was just 90,000 state licensed, which is partly because a lot of state licensed people are going over to the federal side and starting banks in order to avoid licensing and avoid being, state, being able to be in all the states without having a license in those states. So, so whatever's left over, there's still people fighting for deals. And it's still, as long as we're fighting for deals, there's going to be fraud. And if you look at it, like if you're going to do 30 loans this month, right? And you do 29, you made a ton of money. You're not worried about the one that you lost. If you're going to do 2 loans and you're about to lose one, you are massively worried about losing that deal, which means you're willing to do more or turn your head or come up with some sort of creative way to do it. So, yeah.
Interesting that you say that. So Oregon and Idaho is where I do the bulk of my business. I'll probably do a dozen deals in California, and I do a couple in Washington. Well, last year I did 2 in Washington. I got audited.
Yeah.
But I passed with flying colors. The one thing that they had called out was that my LOA needed to be licensed in Washington.
Right.
Right. So she was only licensed in Oregon where I'm licensed. But because she has her hands on the file, she wasn't quoting rate or doing any of those things. But the auditor at Washington State, DFI in Washington.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
DFI.
Do not mess with them.
Yeah. I was going to say.
They had strongly recommended that she get her license. So she's been taking your course, and I believe has just submitted it to the NMLS. So it stands to reason, those who are doing a lot of business, I mean, people will look at that, but the auditors are probably looking at the, maybe people who are doing 15 or 20 loans a year of like, hey, how are you getting this? Are you just doing it part-time or are you struggling like the rest of us?
Dude, Idaho drives me insane. They're the only regulator I've ever yelled at. And it was because they busted a case where these loan officers had set up separate companies. One had a marketing company, one had a tech company, one had a trading company. And they were laundering money through those 3 companies. And so Idaho caught it, went to them, proved that it was, that they had set these up and they were all just shell corporations in order to launder money. And they didn't even take their license. Like they were just like, promise you'll never do this again. This is a massive federal crime, right?
Gosh.
You're setting up shell corporations.
I'm moving to Idaho.
Dude, I reached out. I'm like, how do you walk away from this? And then tell me how I can teach this.
Idaho was I don't mean to cut you off. Idaho was the toughest state for me to get licensed in.
Yeah.
It was literally the most difficult state for me to get through. I had to jump through so many hoops. I had to write so many letters of explanation for being an idiot in my late teens and early 20s. And then, but now to know this.
Once you're licensed, you're good.
Man.
So yeah.
Can't do anything wrong.
I yelled at him. I'm like, you have to do something because I can't go out there and teach that you can't do this stuff because when I do, people go, what's my potential punishment? And I tell them and they're like, who has been punished? And I'm like, nobody. Like it's hard, right? People are getting busted. Different states do different things, but you're not safe committing mortgage fraud because you are still taking a risk that could end your license, end your career, and put you in jail. But it's hard for me when that stuff happens and there's no punishment to be able to stand up in front of people and be like, don't do it because you're a good person and you don't want to not be a good person. Like that can't be the best argument.
Doesn't give you much ground to stand on.
Right,
Yeah.
totally.
So if Randy loses his license after this, what do you think his dream job's going to be?
Do you want to know my dream job?
I totally do.
Okay, so for years, going back to the Sons of Compliance,
Yes.
I've always wanted to participate in one of your filmings. So I am
Cameo.
saying right now that I would love. I will make the drive.
Oh my
I've got
gosh.
places to stay. I have family.
You are so in. Yeah.
I just want to be a part of it, and I want to be a bad guy.
Okay.
If that's possible.
We literally had a meeting this week. They're like, we need more actors. I'm like, I
Yes.
bet I could get you more actors.
Sign me up.
All right, you're in. We'll get
Okay.
you in this year.
So, Ken,
So,
what is your final warning about? Final warning to loan originators, realtors, and the like about loan fraud. What's your final warning?
Final warning, you can't change something you've done, right? Once you've done it, you're there. You can't go back and undo it. And
I think that with the music is more
I
terrifying.
know. Well, I've talked to people I've had 2 people recently, they got these letters from the state saying that they've done something wrong. They looked and they did. And their feeling of getting that letter from the state and going, oh, like you can't undo it. And to get that, to get that letter in the mail, I hate opening up FedExes with one sheet in the FedEx. Every time I get a FedEx that's thin, I freak out because I've
Now I'm going to.
I've gotten 2 cease and desist and a subpoena.
Oh my gosh.
The cease and desist were from companies where I use their names in classes, but the subpoena was that one where I had to submit all of my, the video of this class. When you open it, that feeling sucks, and you can't go back and change. You just have to go, what did I do? And I'll tell you one other quick thing on this. The case that I helped investigate where 12 people went to prison, my class that I taught that what they were doing was fraudulent. Everybody who stopped committing fraud at that point became a witness. Everybody who continued doing fraud became a defendant. And so they knew that on that day you knew what you were doing was wrong, which means if you kept doing it, they wanted you. And so remember that once you've learned something, it's okay to go, I can't change what I've already done, but I can change who I'll be in the future.
Mm-hmm. Just do the right thing.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I feel
love
like
that.
we could talk about loan fraud all day long, but we have
Absolutely.
something very, very important.
It's everyone's favorite game show where the winner keeps their jobs and the losers go home with a hefty fine and most likely jail time. The game is it loan fraud?
Is it loan fraud?
That was great. So good.
All right, I'm going to quiz you guys about loan fraud
Okay,
scenarios.
we got
Here
our
we go.
buzzers.
We're ready.
I'm going to give you brief explanations as to why it is or is not loan fraud. Are you ready?
Okay.
Okay, some 10-point questions first.
Yeah.
The borrower gives you a bank statement that says out of 20 pages, you only have 10. You simply use a little whiteout so the underwriter doesn't ask the missing pages. Oh! Is it loan fraud?
It's loan fraud.
You nailed it. You nailed it. That is
Katie
loan
gets
fraud.
10 points.
I saw one where somebody just added a 0 to the end of the bank statement, didn't make any other changes, and it's like it was outside of the margin. Like at least be good. You nailed it. It is loan fraud. All right, second 10-point question. You've received 4 pay stubs from the borrower, but you only need 3, and the most recent one has a deduction for alimony. You simply do not provide the pay stub to the underwriter because you don't need it. Is it loan fraud? Yep.
Yes?
Yes, it is loan fraud.
Wow.
Yeah.
10 points for Greg.
That
All
is, by
right.
the way, a very common one. Hiding something. In that case, you found out there's alimony involved. That's always going to come back and bite you.
Alimony
Hide
matters?
it.
I didn't realize.
Sometimes, maybe.
Weird.
And by the way, the funny thing on that is just go back and find out if you can use the alimony. Like if it doesn't hurt your debt ratio, put it out there and
Use
then
it.
just do the freaking loan. We hide stuff we don't even need to hide. All right, 20-point questions. Are you ready?
Ooh, yes.
Your
It's
borrower
getting
works for a family member and only has cash for their down payment. You recommend they give it to their employer and have them add it to a bonus on their next check. Is it? Oh yeah, Randy.
Ooh, no.
You don't think that's loan fraud? Oh, that is incorrect. It is absolutely loan
I hope
fraud.
that
They
being
work
an
for mom and
actor- I
dad.
hope that being an
Yeah.
actor for Ken Perry pays well.
Okay, I'm sitting in the hole at -20.
So yeah, remember it's a knowing misrepresentation. They're misrepresenting that money is actually coming in through a bonus when it's not. All right.
Thank you for teaching us.
By the way, some of the stuff that people do to commit loan fraud is because the guidelines are so stupid. Like will never advocate for a guideline that says, something like this. Like they have the money, so
Yeah.
let them use it. All right. You're doing a cash out refinance and the borrower tells you that they are going to use the proceeds to buy another house, but you check the other box on the loan application. Is it loan fraud?
No.
Katie?
Nope. Not loan fraud.
So did they say
They
we're
didn't
not going
tell
to use
me.
this? Oh, you're trying the
It
plausible
says
deniability
they are going to
aspect.
use their proceeds to buy another
Oh, it
house.
says, they did tell us in
Yeah.
documentation.
Oh, that's
on the
-20 for
application.
Katie. She has said that
You're looking
minus
like
10.
a winner over here. All right.
Let's step it up.
We got a 50-point question. Are you ready?
Yes.
Your best friend is going through a divorce, and it hasn't been filed yet. The house is only in their name, and they want to cash out as much equity as they can before the divorce is final. Nothing has been filed with the courts, but you know the divorce is imminent, and you proceed with their loan. Is it loan fraud?
Yes.
This is a tough one, which is why it's a 50-point question.
Oh, Greg.
Maybe.
Oh.
The house is only
take
in their name. They want to cash out as
Uh-huh.
much equity. Here's the question you could ask yourself. If I tell the underwriter, would they change the underwrite? Because remember the end of that definition of fraud is in order to encourage the granting of a loan. If it doesn't apply or if it doesn't change the deal, then it's not loan fraud. You didn't really hide anything that was substantive. But if you know it's going to happen and you were to tell your underwriter and they would say deal's different, then it would be loan fraud.
And that's something that's very common in our industry.
Yeah. All right,
Divorces.
next question, 50 points. You sent too much paperwork to the underwriter and something in the file could kill the
I
deal.
love that that's enough to make
The
them laugh.
underwriter says they won't include it in the shipping package to the investor. Is it loan fraud?
Yes.
Yeah, because it could kill the deal. Yep, you nailed it. Yep, if they're not going to submit it 'cause it could kill the deal, yeah. I once saw an AE do a presentation for loan officers where they said the thing that makes me valuable is my underwriters will shred your W-2s or send them back to you and just go stated. That was a long time ago.
Wow.
Wow.
All right, your borrower wants to buy a second home in a resort area. Oh, this is such a great question right now because I want to buy in Sun River. You all know that. Your
Yeah,
borrower-
still hasn't happened yet, huh?
It's gonna. I'm waiting for the market to come down a little bit. It's starting. There's a lot of houses now. Your borrower wants to
Sounds
buy a second home in a
familiar.
resort area that allows short-term rentals. They have not indicated a desire to put the property into a short-term rental pool, but you lock it as an investment property so you can use the market rents to qualify. Without using the rents, you will not qualify, so this seems like a simple fix. Is it loan fraud?
Yes. I'm
Okay.
digging a hole.
No, well, it allows for short-term rentals. They're not indicating their desire to put it into a short-term rental pool.
The definition of a second home is that you will occupy the property for at least 2 weeks out of the year, and you sign an occupancy agreement at the end of the loan. I have had AE after AE tell me, oh, just flip it to investment. Their DTI is
Right.
too high in a second. Oh, just flip it to an investment.
I would ask them, it doesn't have to be in a short-term pool, but I would ask them, will you be renting this out? And if they're like hardcore no, like some people will never rent their house out. They're
Right.
just not interested. If that's the case, then, then you
Yeah.
would not ever say that they would be an investment. But if they say, yeah, we're going to do that, then I think you'd be fine.
That still didn't answer my question all the way, but what a fun
It's
game
not,
show.
we need more information.
They
This is
have
true.
not
Yeah, I'll take
indicated
25
a
points.
desire, but you could ask, would you, if you needed
Or do you
to,
plan
even,
to?
Do you plan to?
Right.
Yeah, if they haven't communicated desire, maybe you just haven't had that conversation yet with them.
Yeah.
So
You need a bigger conversation. I'm still giving you the points. I think you're good.
I got
Oh, he
points.
still gets
I
the
got points,
I think
Randy.
so.
You put me down for those 50.
Because it's most likely, I mean, if they haven't indicated a desire, like how did you not have that conversation by now? We're probably just trying to, do something bad.
this is a bunch of crap.
Feels like misrepresentation.
Because Katie ended the game with positive 40 points, Greg with positive 10 points. Yes. I God, -10.
You go to jail. You go to
You
jail.
lose-
Katie,
you
welcome
lose
back
your
to the
license.
industry. You get all the loans they used to do.
Yeah, hopefully it was in Idaho that you
Oh
committed that crime.
my gosh. Well, let's talk about the truth in lending mortgage news as we wrap up today's podcast. Despite positive headway on inflation, bonds continue their sell-off and rates continue to deteriorate.
Womp womp.
Big surprise there.
CNBC reports UBS to pay $1.4 billion for fraud in mortgage-backed securities. The Justice Department alleges that the banks knew the mortgages underneath the securities were problematic or non-compliant, but sold them anyway.
That just came out yesterday.
There you go.
I was like, how apropos. Ken's coming on the show. We're talking about
Here we
loan
are.
fraud and $1.4 billion.
$1.4 billion with a B.
It's just a drop in the bucket next to
What they made.
Wells Fargo.
Oh. Hey, I think it's refreshing to see a case that isn't against Wells Fargo.
Right.
That is nice.
There are other bad actors.
Yeah.
CPI and core CPI increased by 0.2% in July, which was as expected.
As expected. Boring.
Boring. Next.
Realtor.com reports weekly active inventory down 9% year over year. New listings down 14%.
Feel that.
Yeah,
Nationwide.
no doubt. More fun on mortgage rates because who doesn't love mortgage rates? Mortgage Rate Watt says rates are officially the highest since November 2022. And speaking of rates, average rate today, as reported by Mortgage News Daily, is 7.26% for a 30-year fixed. FHA and VA right up there close to 7%. That's a little wild. So
here we are.
yeah, like Ken
Well-
said, if you have learned something on today's show and you continue to do it,
Now you know. You have proof. You
it's more
listened to
market
it.
share for me. Please.
It's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
You guys get to stay in the business.
Ken,
Good
thanks so
guys.
much for joining us today. You're actually in town, or you're teaching a 8-hour.
We have 8 hours tomorrow.
8 hours
continuing
tomorrow.
education.
Wow.
Yep.
Anyone in Bend needing their CE, we'll see you there.
See you later, potato heads.